Well, I'm here with Chris Martinovich, who's the founder of Ozark United, which is the soccer team we're hoping to see in Northwest Arkansas. Chris, how you doing?
Doing great, Andy. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate all the hard work. As you know, I happen to be a soccer fan and just a sports fan in general. And so I'm cheering for you guys to get this all pulled off. And I'm looking forward to sort of talking about all of the, how this thing all starts. But first, tell me a little, just for everybody, tell us a little bit about you. How did you get to Arkansas?
Yeah, it's a pretty typical story of a lot of folks in Northwest Arkansas, right? I grew up not here, but I grew up in the Northeast in New York and New Jersey. I didn't know much about Arkansas, and I was working for a company called Bayer and selling drugs legally to a lot of our retailers and the over-the-counter to business. And obviously Walmart was our largest customer and an opportunity to come down. And that was 2006. At that time, it was supposed to be an 18-month journey. Hey, go down, get some experience on Walmart. We'll bring you back to headquarters.
Yes. I'm an out-of-stater too. I actually have a similar story where I met a girl and then I thought I was going to be here for a short thing, like a few months, and I've been here for decades. And so, but yeah,
it's actually almost 20 years now for me, Andy, being here, and we decided to raise our family here. We love it. This is home and wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Like I actually tell people I'm from here, because so often people ask, they don't really want the whole story. So it's just easier. Yeah. And I just sort of feel like I am anyway, and so, now, I live in Yell County, so I'm sure folks in Yell County might not still consider me a homeboy, but I like to think that way. So I'm sure you're like me. I'm sure you like lots of other sports. So, okay, how do you, tell me about how did it start where you guys thought about bringing professional sports to Northwest Arkansas, and why soccer over, hockey and football and basketball and other ones?
Yeah. Two-part question, so I'll try to address both of those. As much as we loved living here when we came here, we got into Razorbacks and college football and basketball, which wasn't very big in the Northeast, right? You grew up in the Northeast, you're a pro sports fan. I had 12 pro sports teams that I could follow for, 4 or 5 major sports. Now I grew up playing soccer as my favorite sport, but I was really, really enjoyed playing basketball. It's probably my favorite sport to watch still, honestly. I did track in high school and I was an all-state track athlete as well. So I really enjoyed just athletics overall. And when we came here, we found ourselves driving 2 to 5 hours to go experience pro sports. So for example, from Bentonville area, go out to Oklahoma City for NBA game. We drove down to Dallas for a Cowboys football game, Kansas City for a lot of MLS games, right? And St. Louis and Memphis. So we've done that. And then what I found was that I had peers and mutual friends and others that had families that they were taking their kids out for all these weekends away and giving their money from Northwest Arkansas out to other regions. And it just always was in my brain about, man, it would be great if we could ever make this a pro sports market. But back in 2006, that was not in my brain. I didn't think about it back then. It was just kind of a wish. The actual process and the first time I told somebody about my crazy plan was 2019. And that I was very fortunate since I played college soccer and a little bit of pro soccer in an old version of the USL. I had some good contacts in the sport, and I reached out to, at the time, a really good friend of mine who was a president of the USL, Jake Edwards, former president. Now he runs Huddersfield Town in England. It's a professional football club over there. And so he's the president and CEO. But for 10 plus years, he was really one of the leading growth drivers along with the Papadakis family of growing and expanding USL. And that's how it started. I reached out to him. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know where we'd do it. I didn't know if we'd try to do it. I just gave him the pitch about why Arkansas, why Northwest Arkansas, and what a great community we have. That's literally how it started.
So before we explain, USL, Major League Soccer, how it all works together, which I think is relevant just for context.
Yeah.
Before we do that, I am just curious about your thoughts about this. So I happen to believe that Arkansas needs a pro sports team. And a lot of times when we talk about that, there's almost this like, if I were to say that, and when I do say that to people say things like, well, the market's not big enough, stuff like that. And maybe that's true, but if we're thinking, decades out, and we're thinking about what pro sports can do to a community, et cetera, I see no reason not to pursue it. And, because I think it builds community, I think it builds pride, I think it adds economics to it. I'm just curious. I know you've been a part of this process for quite a while now, but just like without us diving into soccer just yet, you got any statistics that you've got that you use to talk about what it does for, economic development in the area, or just other stats that you typically would quote to somebody why it's a worthy adventure, a worthwhile, noble pursuit?
Yeah, there's a lot of data. There's a lot of data and stats on what professional sports can do for markets and for communities. One, it's just a feeling of pride, right? That's like the community benefit of, man, we have a professional sports, even if it's not in Division I of the major league level, there's still a feeling of pride. And that's where USL does really well, because they specialize in those markets that aren't, 1 million plus for the most part, markets that are under 1 million. And they have 40 plus professional franchises, right? And when you think about the major league teams of any sport, so you take NFL, NBA, MLS, NHL, and MLB, those kind of 5 major league sports, they're going to generally stick to the top 30 markets, right? Why? Because it's about media and it's about eyeballs and it's about population sizes, right? That's the tough part about the rest of the country doesn't get to experience that coolness, that funness, that community building. And that's the great part about what USL's been able to do, because you can do it at a fraction of the cost. You can build a stadium at a fraction of the cost in a modular way, still make it really fun and friendly and professional. You don't have a $500 to $1 billion expansion fee to get a team. So that's a big factor, right? You can do that for a fraction of the cost. And, you don't need to fill a stadium to survive in the USL or in our level. You don't need to have 25,000 seats, right? And those are all requirements to become a major league. So, Andy, to your point, I say that all the time to people. Man, we deserve to be a professional sports market. And people will say, well, we're small. We don't have these. Well, there's levels of professional sports. So teams often, I think the stat is about 10 MLS teams of the last 11 or so have been from USL markets and have advanced into MLS, right? Yeah. And it's a proving ground. It's a trial. It's an opportunity where you can do it at a lower risk level and then have that growth. And we have a market that's growing as fast as anybody in the country. Yeah. Right.
It's funny on this point. So like, here's the way I sort of think about this. And I'm just going to rip through the other sports and then we'll sort of pause on soccer. So, okay, I hear you, especially on the NFL, but the NFL's in Milwaukee and I don't know where Milwaukee stands in the top 30 cities, but I don't know.
Green Bay is completely unique, one-off.
Totally unique. But,
freak show.
And I would say, if I was to say about Arkansas and the NFL, let's just say, we've proven we can fill out a stadium that's massive, so I would say that, of course they control their own destiny and what cities they pick, but I would like to think that you could go to off markets in the NFL. Now, when we talk about Major League Baseball, of course, they've got minor leagues in all sorts of secondary cities. What I find interesting about soccer, and what a lot of people probably don't know, is that we go back to, first off, there was a league that started in the 60s that went defunct, I think, in like 81 or 82 or 80.
Early 80s, yep.
And
ASL.
And so when Major League Soccer started up in 96, they set it up where the league has some ownership and some controls over all the teams. So they have salary caps and things like that. And I believe you could get into the league without a stadium and like $10 million, Crazy. And so there was like 12 teams. Today, I think the last team that came in, and I think there are 30 teams in Major League Soccer, maybe 29.
Yeah.
And with San Diego, I think they had to pay $500 million to get into the league.
Exactly right. Half a billion, and they want the new one, the next one, which might be Vegas or maybe another big market, to go for 750 to $1 billion.
It's a big initiation fee, and you got to have a stocker only stadium. Okay. But the reason people are doing it is because they perceive as a business it's a growth market. And that's true with all the other sports as well. But like just as a data point, I saw a list last week, in fact, that showed soccer clubs around the world and where they're valued. And let's say it was the top 50, but 16 MLS teams were on that list,
Unbelievable. It's actually amazing.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of co-ownership, which I think is interesting. So the guys that own Atlanta United own the Falcons. The guys that own the Patriots own the New England Revolution. You've got
even in USL, Andy, Tampa Bay and San Antonio, Tampa Bay Devil Rays and San Antonio, their entities own the USL teams. So they're seeing even at the second division level of the future value of the sport in this group.
So the reason you'd invest is that, it has this upside, and you see now private equity also enter into a lot of these
it's a new game now with private equity coming in. And the only point, Andy, that's really important to make on those MLS owners, these guys were pioneers. They lost money for 10 plus years. They didn't even know if the league was going to survive when you got to the mid 2000s until Beckham really kind of came and took this kind of big, massive spike in the league. And now, those franchises that they bought for 10 or 20 million, whatever the exact number was, they're sitting at $500 million valuation and plus, right? I think in Miami was like $1 billion. It's insane.
So you've got a league, and this is true in other sports too, but you got a league where I put in $1 and maybe I lose money as I go to year, but when I sell it, I make 10x or whatever. And that's why I play this game. There's another aspect I think that's really interesting, which is because soccer is a global game, it's a global market for players. And if you can develop young players and you have a contract with that player, you then essentially can assign or sell that contract. And you're watching a lot of MLS teams bring somebody on, let's say they get paid, $500,000 a year to play under a contract, but that guy becomes so good that they sell that contract for $10 million that they get to keep. Now the player may get a bump in compensation as well. And so there's another element, I think, in minor league soccer. So
it's a revenue stream. Transfers is a revenue stream now. Yep.
Can you explain, just for anybody, what's the difference between Major League Soccer and USL?
Yep. So Major League Soccer is governed. U.S. Soccer governs how pro soccer is set up, and it's set up on criteria. And there's criteria that leads this, which is population. To be a Division I MLS team, I think it's 1 or 1.5 million, kind of in that range. Of terms of population, you need to have a soccer-only facility, as you mentioned, and that needs to be 20,000 minimum seating capacity. They'd probably want to push that even higher. And you have to have an owner that has a really, really significant net worth. I forgot what that number is right now. But you're dwindling down that audience pretty quickly when you get to that level, right? When you get to Division II and Division III, which is where USL currently resides, that criteria becomes more open to people, right? You can get an expansion fee, call it, they're off the streets for $20-ish million. They now have a women's program as well in the USL Super League, which is really exciting, that competes at the Division I level. You can build a stadium requirement, minimum is 5,000 instead of the 20,000. So now you open the door again to a lot more markets, as long as you have a plan to continue to expand that. And so it does open the door to communities, even around us. Think about Memphis had a championship level team. Tulsa has one. Oklahoma City is getting one back. Dallas is now starting one in North Texas. San Antonio has a really successful team. Just in our area, there's going to be some pretty cool rivalries at a championship level. And then even up into Omaha, you have some League One competition as well, which is pretty cool. So that's the third division of U.S. soccer.
So, let me see if I can regurgitate that. So you've got United States, the overall, body of United States soccer sort of controls the different leagues. Right. Major League Soccer is, let's say, Division I. That's right. With 30 teams and this big stadiums, bigger dollars. USL is its own league with how many teams in it today?
There's about 25 championship and then like 26 championship, I think, and then like 12 or so League One. with several slated expansions, and then about 8 in the Super League, the Women's Super League, which is the first year they're running, and that has about 4 to 6 expansion markets for next year.
So let's say that's
so
like
40 plus.
40 plus teams.
Yep.
And so you got 40 different businesses essentially that were set up
Yep.
with a stadium of, let's call it 5,000 to, and up.
Some up to like Louisville, I think now is holding 12,000 or so.
And I've seen a lot of videos, some of these games, there's plenty of people at these stadiums. I mean, it's probably just, and I don't know what the Travelers down in Little Rock, what they pick up but I'll come to that here in a second. Yeah. So you're in this league, you pay a smaller initiation fee, smaller field. I'm not a smaller field, but a smaller stadium.
Yep.
And then a league that's been around for quite a while that you're part of. So it's a healthy league that you're playing in.
Yeah, it's very sustainable at this point. It wasn't 10, 15 years ago,
Okay, so you're a businessman. You came up with this idea. Tell us a little bit about how, how early days, what's it like? I assume it's like building any business from scratch.
That's exactly right.
How hard?
It's it's an entrepreneurial startup at the beginning, right? You have an idea. What the first thing you try to do is put some business behind it, but you put some numbers behind it, but really you're socializing your idea, right? You're starting to sell your idea just at a concept level. And I've worked in business for 20 plus years. A lot of that's been in, sales and operations. And so putting a story together around this was important at the beginning. First, I had to convince the league and just to get them excited about it, because they thought this was a smaller market. Not sure that Arkansas is where we want to go. And also just within Arkansas, you had a League Two team in Little Rock that was already playing and started, right? The Rangers, they've done a great job down there. And then the league doesn't really know much about Northwest Arkansas. And so I'm educating them. And so luckily I had the relationship with Jake, and Jake then quickly kind of understood what I was trying to do here and got me connected with their expansion team. And they finally came out for a visit. When they came for a visit and they saw the community, got to meet with the local leaders, understood the growth potential of Northwest Arkansas in particular, they became really excited, right? And you had to get him here. So that was the beginning, is just me going. And the first person, by the way, I ever talked to, it's a funny story. He was a Walmart exec. I really valued his opinion as a business person. But he was a person that grew up in Arkansas, was Arkansas through and through, and a football, baseball kind of guy.
Yep.
And an older gentleman. And so probably not in our demographic of kind of what you think of most soccer. It's generally a little bit of a younger sport. And he thought it was not a great idea when I had it. And so think about me. I'm all excited. I'm in my first pitch. Let me get some momentum. And this guy's like, yeah, I don't know about soccer. So I quickly realized I couldn't just come and talk to people. I needed to put some data in front of them. So I started to put some slides of soccer's growth and the upside of economic development and some stadium development and what that does. And so I just kind of built a few statistics and stories together to help my next meetings. And those all went better. And so we just started to build it, socialize it. I didn't know how to do it, Andy. I started to reach out to the soccer community. I was very fortunate. In soccer, probably more than other sports, everybody's trying to grow the sport while they're trying to grow their team. Yeah. And so they're very willing to help. A couple names, got connected with John Harkes, former U.S. soccer team legend. New Jersey guy. We had mutual friends. I kind of sort of knew him in New Jersey, but now he's been a great asset to me, and he connected me to other folks and just helping guide that process. I know you should go talk to these guys. They just started an expansion team, and the support within the soccer community is like nothing I've ever seen. It's really, really cool.
So you start this in 19.
Yes.
Right.
Just talking about it.
What's the sort of first milestone that you would say okay, we've gone from just purely an idea where you're doing conference calls or phone calls to hey, this is a thing. When does that become a thing?
For me, I was very fortunate. As I kind of tried to just start building this, work with the league, talk to some potential, ownership groups, but it was way too early for that process because we didn't even know what we were going to do. Right. But we probably jumped in a little too quick to try to even solve that problem, because you can't really solve the ownership problem. You need to kind of understand what you're trying to solve for, meaning where you're going to play, what's the best location? How much does that cost? What else you can do around the stadium? What does that infrastructure look like? Like, there's a million questions before you can get to asking someone about investing, right? And so we started to do that, and they really progressed when I met Warren Smith. So Warren Smith has done this 4 times before. One of the most successful teams in the league is Sacramento Republic. Them and Louisville are kind of like the gold standard. He actually did so well at Sacramento that MLS came in and awarded them an MLS bid and opportunity, which was accepted. The new owner never took it to that level. That was after Warren kind of stepped away from it. But they got the acceptance in the bid to become an MLS franchise.
I did not know that.
That team ended up being the San Diego team, the current San Diego team. So interesting story. For me, I was really lucky that Warren Smith, who's from California, has been coming to Northwest Arkansas for 30 years. His grandparents moved here. His parents then moved here, and he started visiting. So he knew about our story in Arkansas, knew about what we were about and the growth and the potential, and said, Chris, this is a great idea. I heard you're doing. At that time, he was working with the San Diego Loyal with Landon Donovan, and he couldn't kind of step away at that time. Fast forward, that was about 2021 and 2022. He came back and they said, hey, I'm going to work with the league in expansion startups. They have a lot of expansion opportunities. This is what Warren really loves. He loves the building of things. And that's when we formed our partnership officially. So, the way I look at it is I tell the story. 2019 was the idea. I didn't know what to do, how to do it. I just started learning, asking. I was on YouTube. I was looking up like what pro sports means and really trying to connect. We became a real kind of organization in 22, and 2023 was the first time that we went public in July and said, here's our intentions, right? Here's what we're actually looking to do and build it forward. So that's kind of the really high level time frame. The how you do that is about finding a place first. And that's really been a lot of our focus, Andy. So you kind of asked about, the how and what is important, but like the location is the game changer for almost all pro sports.
And I know that I'm sort of leaping forward a little bit, but just so you can just lay this out. What right now? I know it's changed a little bit, but where's the location set right now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We were when we first started the process, we narrowed our search down to about 15 locations all over Northwest Arkansas, from as far down as Fayetteville all the way up into Bentonville and all the cities in between. Springdale and Lowell, I looked at multiple opportunities there. We always had our eye on kind of Pinnacle Hills area in Rogers and really felt like that was a great opportunity for several reasons. One, it's kind of become the entertainment center of Northwest Arkansas. You have the Walmart Amphitheater there, big concerts. You have Top Golf just came there. You have a promenade that's the center of everything with a shopping mall. You have breweries that have opened there, restaurants that have opened there. So Northwest Arkansas comes from the north, from Bentonville and Bella Vista, to do things there and be entertained, and also from the south. And it's right off the highway. So you have a lot of benefits of central location, right off the highway, and built-in entertainment already. Our sport's 2 hours long, Andy, as you know, right? We're not a 3-4 hour sport. So if we're going to really kind of succeed here, not just drive the soccer fan to come, but bring a casual fan to attend our game. That's the goal here. You're going to have to provide 5 to 6 hours of entertainment. And so you need to be around things. And so that's how we ended up in Pinnacle Hills. And we just shifted our location recently. In Pinnacle Hills, probably about 500 yards away from the old lot, but it's twice the size, better access on an intersection, more parking opportunities off-site there. It allows us to really develop around the stadium and make that a place, make that a home, make that a location where people will go, even when there's not games.
So I think the Pinnacle Hills area is fantastic. When I'm up there, it's just construction like crazy up in Northwest Arkansas. I mean, it's I heard the other day that, and you probably know it better than me. Do you know the statistics on how many people are moving there a day?
The last I heard was 40 people a day.
Yeah, I heard 38.
38, yeah.
And it surely looks like it, and so it's
not stopping. That's for sure.
What it could become is fantastic, and I think it's driving the state in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So, and I want you to explain it, but I'm curious. So, can you tell a little bit about who gave you your first dollar, if you can say their name? You don't have to say it if you don't want to, but total dollars that you have sort of gathered so far ish, and then. Okay, once you start talking about a team, I'm assuming there's two aspects. There's land, stadium, development stuff, and then there's team stuff. And I don't know if there's another bucket too.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the money for a second, and then then I want to hear the vision,
Yep. So
maybe that's the wrong order, but let's just do it that way.
No. So pretty soon we'll release some information on one of our first kind of biggest investors locally that we had. So I can't unveil it yet, Andy, on your podcast here.
No problem.
But it's coming soon. We're going to work on a little announcement. What I'll say is, and most of his demographics kind of fits most of the demographics of kind of our ownership group to date. It's people who believe in the state, believe in this community, see the future, have the same vision that we have, align with our values, and want to participate in that growth and that long-term valuation creation, right? So that's kind of the general mantra. Not everybody who's invested is from Northwest Arkansas or from Arkansas, which is really interesting too, right? Sometimes people from outside see our upside more than people in our community do. Yeah. Which is really interesting, Yeah,
I can see that. So just rough, because I realize this game is you're going to need the couple backers that can really support a big project.
Yeah.
So rough dollars to run a team and to like build the development. Are we talking $100 million, $150 million?
Listen, what we've publicly stated, and it's still fairly consistent, is that soccer team, land, stadium, startup cost for soccer team, just from a soccer standpoint. Right, remember, we're not getting any public financing for the stadium.
Right. This is all private, which is a big deal.
Privately financing the whole thing. It's a big project, right?
Yep.
We wouldn't be where we are without the investors that we've had to date, right? And so roughly it's about a $55 to $60-ish million project from a soccer standpoint, including team, including construction, including land, right there. In the newer property, we've supplemented that with a broader development complex that's a mixed-use real estate. And why that's really important is, one, that cash flows generally a lot quicker than soccer does. We talked earlier, soccer's not an annual cash flow. Most pro sports aren't annual cash flows. You're in pro sports because you're looking at the long-term valuation growth, right? So how do you help cash flow the project quicker is a lot of mixed-use real estate development that serves the need of the stadium, meaning we want to have an ownership group that has control over the whole prospect, right? Everybody's playing in the same area, because if you have a real estate developer that's different from the stadium ownership, the real estate developer might want to do things that we might not want for the stadium. So we want to have a pub. We want to have a brew pub, some local brew, maybe some cool shops, some cool, snack places that don't exist that are great for the stadium, but can also be a place where people will also have, let's say, first floor retail, but then on the top it's, living, right? And it's apartment.
One of the things I find really interesting about this, in terms of the opportunity, is, and you make a good point. If you haven't been to certain stadiums, you might not appreciate some of the unique things around them. Like if you go to the Cubs, you're right in the middle of,
primo destination.
Yeah, so it's such a cool area. Or if you look at certain shopping areas that like just Laramie Square in Denver, Highland Park Village in Dallas. And I'm not saying that's exactly what you're doing, but I would say that there is a vision of what a new stadium might look like. And what you're basically saying is, hey, look, we're going to have a stadium, but it's a bigger piece of land, so we're going to have shops, restaurants,
right.
And
we need housing in Northwest Arkansas,
and then housing as well.
Yeah,
So
listen, that project is really, really exciting because it helps us diversify the investment even more. A lot of people are familiar with real estate. They understand the growth of Northwest Arkansas. So just the dirt and the land itself has value. On top of stadium and team, on top of real estate development, right? And so we're really excited about the new property. We've literally just kind of announced that in the last month or so. And that's helped us now. The next step, Andy, is you kind of been raising our startup capital to really just keep building it, right? We're building it while we fly it, while we operate it, right? And so you have to lean out and build this infrastructure and build the beginnings of a team, right? We spent this brand I'm wearing. We spent, hours and hours and a year developing what Ozark United brand means and how it came to us is from the community. And so that's really, really important because we have like 8,000 fans in our database. That converts to roughly, let's say 40% of those are generally going to buy season tickets. Of that 40%, you're going to have 2 to 2.5 tickets per purchase. Now you're well over 5,000 seats already in season tickets, which is our announced initial opening. So we feel really good about the attendance. That's the number one priority, because that's 40-ish% of your revenue stream is ticket sales. The other big chunk is sponsorships. That's about 40% of your revenue stream at the USL level. That's how the clubs get propped up. And so we feel really good about the local discussions we're having with sponsorships. So those two elements just kind of keep us so bullish and excited about what this thing's going to look like in the future.
Okay, two questions. One is, if things go like you think, when would be the first time you kick a soccer ball in a game? Just guessing.
It's a great question, because when I first started, part of the problem, Andy, was that I had it backwards. I was a soccer guy, and I was like, man, we get to build a team. Like, what players do I should, what coaches and agents, and I quickly realized, like, the soccer part is like, you always have it in your brain, but there's so many steps before you get to the soccer part, right?
Oh yeah.
Finding our target date right now is March 2027. Okay,
got it.
So
okay.
We're roughly just within 2 years of that window. That sounds like a lot of time, but it's not. A lot needs to happen in that window.
I'm curious, what is some of the, like, like if you were giving advice to not necessarily somebody trying to start a professional team, but just a startup in general, because really what I look at what you're doing is, it's so challenging to have an idea. So many people have ideas. They're a dime a dozen, right? But the grind, the headwinds that you face, in all aspects, people telling you no. What is the secret to get there? Because it looks like it, and it feels like, you're inching closer and closer to this reality.
Right. That's right. Here's what I'll say, man. Like, I'm not a professional entrepreneur, and most of my career I've spent in the corporate America, right? Which you would say is the opposite of entrepreneurial work, right? It's bureaucratic, it's slow, it's bogged down by managers. That was actually the part that I really didn't like about corporate America, and hence kind of moved my career into a smaller startup private equity side at the same time while I was doing this. So I became, from a really corporate guy, now I'm in two small startup in my day job and my new job here with Ozark United. Both I view them as entrepreneurial startups. What you have to be careful of is the ups and downs are dramatic, right? People don't see what's below the iceberg when entrepreneurs kind of are going through their grind. You're gonna sacrifice time for your health. You're gonna sacrifice time for your family. You're gonna sacrifice time for your friends. I like to play more golf. I play a lot less golf than I'd like to. And but it's all choices, right? It's all choices. I don't say that for people to feel sorry. I say that for people to understand, like, if somebody else is thinking about trying to start up something, you got to be all in. Like, there is no middle ground with a startup project on anything, on any launching of a brand, of a website, of a product, of a team. Like, you are all in, and it's all encompassing. And if I didn't have the support from my family, if I didn't have Warren Smith as an experienced entrepreneur and doing this, and Wes Harris doing this every day, and then multiple people in the community supporting, man, it takes a village. This is a public, big entrepreneurial project, not like a little startup that somebody just kind of does on their own. And if you fail, it's not the end of the world. Like, people might not know about a failure of a product launch, but like, people know about this project, right? So the pressure is real. And but all that said, like, I can't think of a time in our process, and there's so many ups and downs, but I can't think of a time in a process where we felt like, you know what, I don't know if we should be doing this. Like, that kind of never really got to that level, which is pretty good for a project like this, because I've talked to a lot of others where there's a lot of moments they're going, maybe we should just kind of walk away.
Yeah, that's the easy thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, two more questions. So the first one is, was there a lucky moment? Because one of the things I would say, I know you don't know all the things that I've done, but I've been a part of a number of what I would say I'm very entrepreneurial.
Andy, you're kind of a big deal. You don't talk about yourself a lot, but you're kind of a big deal in what you've done.
What I was going to say about it, though, is this, Chris, is that I know what it feels like to be worried if you're going to make payroll. I know what that feeling feels like. And, in some businesses, sometimes, and I can point to them because sometimes they're just like, I'd like to think we create our own luck, but sometimes there's just things and moments that happen in businesses where you just go like, oh my gosh, this is going to make it, right? Like, and I remember those moments. And so like, I know you're not there yet, but if you had some moments where you're like, okay, this is a moment right here, maybe it's this individual or this groups of individuals that said, okay, finally, I'm going to take on some weight here. Maybe it's something different, but what can you share?
There's a few key moments already. And I think you're right, Andy, like, when the thing is done, then you kind of have more clarity and you look back and you say, oh yeah, here are those. But I probably will say some of these will probably still be the same. Number one was just getting in front of Warren Smith and knowing that he was in Northwest Arkansas and Jake Edwards, the former president and CEO at USL, connecting us. Like, again, I had the passion, I had the idea, I have a good business background, I love the sport, I love this community, but I never started up a professional sports club. And so when I met Warren, I said, this is a sign, because you fill my gaps, right? It was a great partnership. So that was number one. Number two was I was telling my story to a friend. We were at their house, we had dinner, we were having a drink after dinner and just talking, and I was telling him about soccer. And this was back in COVID time. And he didn't know anything about soccer at all.
Yep.
And could care less about it, honestly. But he said, this is really a cool idea because I know a lot of people. In fact, it was about 10 o'clock on a Friday. I'm going to call this guy that works for me. His name is Wes Harris, and he's at home right now. But if I tell him I'm sitting here with you, I guarantee he's going to come over. Next thing you know, Wes Harris is at his house at 10:05 on a Friday night. Me and Wes start talking, and I realized how aligned we were on our passion for the sport. He's actually probably even a much bigger fan than I am of the sport. And then two, he wants to work. His goal in his career was to work in professional sports. And he thought that he gave that goal up when he moved to Arkansas because of some of the challenges that we talked about. So those are people moments where it was huge in terms of like building this thing. And then the first again, we'll start releasing some of these names, but there was an investor from out of state that I have a long relationship with, who just believed in me and what I was doing. And he was the first one to put his money where his mouth is. And like, we wouldn't have started what we did if he didn't make some significant contributions at that point. That was the first one. Yeah.
Okay. Here's my last thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to see if I can make your case. And I just want to see if you agree with this. So I'm going to be a little philosophical here. I actually think that if we were to project out 2 decades for Arkansas and we were to say, okay, what would Arkansas look like? What would be some of the characteristics if we 20 years from now were not on the bottom of a lot of lists for things that are good and on the top of a lot of things that are bad? What would be some of the elements? And one of the things that I would say is that we would have pro sports. That because pro sports create a sense of community and pride, they give people something to really do that attracts people to move there. And I think that, when we look at the cities that have really grown in the last number of years, let's just use Nashville as an example, or Austin, Charlotte, they've able to, like, in the last couple of decades, do those things. And then I would say, as it relates specifically to Ozark United, at least in soccer, unlike other sports, there is this possibility. I'll admit it's remote, but there's a possibility if you put this on the field, you create a professional organization here, that the city keeps growing, that maybe you move it to a Division I at some point. That is on the chessboard. Admittedly, it's a long putt, but also maybe it's the canary in the coal mine for putting an NFL team, putting in a major league, baseball team, putting in an NBA team, because we as a state should be thinking like that. And it's in the benefit of everybody, even if you hate soccer, even if you think soccer is boring, everybody's holding their shins, it's always 1-to-1, all the negative things you hear. But I look, I think people like live sports. So I don't know if like, am I just full of BS, or is it like philosophically, you're on board because you're biased? I don't know. Or did I make any sense?
It's completely on board, man. I mean, listen, this is a vision that's hard to pull off from a USL standpoint at this level. And then to talk about MLS seems like overwhelming. But the reality is that's how MLS becomes a thing. It's through success of USL that they become interested in a market. And then you grow the population, and then you have, some ownerships that can afford those higher levels of wealth at an MLS level, right? We have those components here. We have the wealth, we have the growth, we have no pro sports in the market, so there's a kind of lack of entertainment, lack of competition in that realm. So we think it's a tremendous opportunity long term, and we want to build this. That's part of why the new location is really exciting, because Andy, we wouldn't have to move from that location in theory if we ever ended up in the MLS scope, because we could put a stadium up to 20,000 there, and we couldn't do that on the old property. We would have to relocate on the old property. So we're taking a little leap here on the bigger property to set us up for the future.
Yeah. Well, and I think Northwest Arkansas has got so much going for it. Well, Chris, listen, thank you for coming on to talk to me. Best of luck. I'm cheering for you. I can't wait till you guys kick the first soccer ball and build this really cool facility. And so with that, I'll wish you a good weekend, and thank you for coming on.
All right, thanks so much, Andy. I appreciate it. And then you got to come on ours next. So
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Pitch to pro.
All righty. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Andy. See you.